Hello, I'm Shane Smith, Director of Programming for Hot Dogs. Thank you for joining us for this special live conversation for the film The Forum, part of our Big Ideas program sponsored by Scotia Wealth Management. I'd like to thank our co-presenter, the Goethe Institute Toronto, for their support. We'd like to acknowledge the diversity of the First Peoples on the territory on which the festival takes place and honor the stewardship of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Iroquois Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. We're grateful to have the opportunity to live on this territory. The format for this event is a hosted conversation with audience questions. You can ask questions by entering them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. This webinar is being closed captioned by AI Media. If you need closed captioning, you can turn it on in your Zoom app. The Forum is an incredible behind-the-scenes look at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where the most powerful leaders and thinkers on the planet gather. We witness astonishing conversations unfold between the likes of Al Gore, Jair Bolsonaro, Jennifer Morgan, and Greta Thunberg during an event with so much at stake. To discuss the film and the issues it raises, I'd like to introduce the host for this event, Anna Maria Tremonti, who is now host of the CBC podcast More and is very well known for hosting CBC Radio's the flagship current affairs program that she helped create. Anna Maria will introduce our fantastic guests. Take it away, Anna Maria.
Well, thank you, Shane. And I'm very excited to be here today with everyone to talk about The Forum. It's a great film, and I just want to cut to the chase and get right to it. So with me, we have Marcus Vetter, who is the director of the film, and Jennifer Morgan, who is the executive director of Greenpeace International, one of the subjects in the film. And hello to you both. Welcome. Oh, great to be here. Hi. There are so many issues to unpack in our discussion today, especially in the midst of a global pandemic and as issues of inequality, especially racial inequality, are confronting society on the streets of cities around the world, even as we speak. And so I think there's great relevance to this film. Marcus, I guess you can add prescience to your list of talents that you could, you're so prescient that you brought this film forward now. But I want to ask you, what was your understanding and your view of the World Economic Forum before you began this documentary?
Oh, actually, I had a very hard time because it was not my idea. It was Christian Bates who approached me. That was the producer. And he had another 3 years before he came to me, because there was another two directors actually involved in that film, and they weren't able to cope with it because probably they were too distanced from the whole thing because they didn't believe in Davos, as I did actually. So when Christian approached me, I had all these preconceptions against that event. I knew it is an event where the elite is meeting, but I didn't know about Klaus Schwab, for example. I didn't really know that he was the founder. And so I didn't really, I wasn't enthusiastic. But the thing, Christian Bates is a great producer, and I thought if he has such incredible access, I'm willing to meet Mr. Schwab. And I met him, and that was the surprise for me, because I encountered a person who I thought is visions, actually. I mean, 50 years ago, he had this idea: what if you gather the most powerful people, can you change the world with them? And I thought that's a decent idea to try, at least. And there was another idea which I didn't know that he had 50 years ago. If you have different stakeholders, the multi-stakeholder approach, that a company is not only responsible for their stockholders, but also for the society as a whole, for nature, for their employees. So that was 50 years ago, and I thought, wow, that's incredible idea. What has happened to them, because we don't believe in the elite anymore. So I began to start to say yes to that film. Let's say I need another 1 year, but that was a start. I was very skeptical.
And you got significant access. How did that happen?
Oh, actually, it was like the access was there by Christian Bates, but nobody approached Klaus Schwab. And I had this very long conversation. I told him that there's only one way I'm gonna make that film. We have a contract with our audience, and we want to know what's behind closed doors. What is at stake here? What does he talk with these presidents all over the world? And I gave him 3 films I made. And I asked him to watch them, that he knows what's the documentary for cinema or for our audience, which we are approaching. And that was interesting because he saw them right away after, I think after 1-2 weeks, he saw them with his wife, and he came back to me and met another time. And so I think through these films and through that conversation, we got all that access. And in 2019, I was there the first time in January. I met this Mr. Trump, and I could shoot him, as you saw, with the CEOs. But during these bilaterals, when he was talking to the heads of states, I was asked by a beautiful lady every time to leave after they talked about the weather, like 5, 6, 7 times. And so after Davos, I wrote him a letter and I said, okay, I'm not going to continue that way. It's impossible if I'm asked to leave always the scene. And he apologized actually and said, okay, it's hard because there's a trust issue with his counterparts, but he's willing to ask them and work for it, that the camera may stay a little bit longer. And when we went to the Asian summit in Asia, suddenly I was allowed to stay there with Aung San Suu Kyi, for example. We were allowed to stay during the whole conversation. So that's when I started to feel comfortable that I get enough access to really get into the whole thing. So I thought I still think that I gained a lot of trust to make that film.
Jennifer Morgan, I couldn't help but smile at the juxtaposition of the shots of the big black SUVs pulling up in Davos to let out the big officials, and then you come along pulling your little rolly suitcase, walking in the snow in your blue jeans. We got the message that you struggled with the very idea of being there, even as you understood that it was a place to confront or work with people with tremendous power. Talk to us a little bit more about how you see that forum.
Well, it is a decision every year that we have to make whether we go or not. And I think because we see the forum as, you know, it is where the elites meet. It's where the corporate giants come together. It's where the people who are destroying the planet, creating inequality, who, you know, keep this predominant system that made our planet such a problem. That's where they all come, and it's what it represents. But at the same time, you know, that's the reason to go, because it's very rare that you get so many bad guys in one place. And, you know, Greenpeace spends a lot of time trying to get the attention, trying to confront these leaders, because we have millions of supporters who want us to engage, to try and put pressure, but also to try and find solutions. And if, you know, the thing that always has driven me in a way is imagine, I mean, and that's some of the conversations I try and have. Imagine if the majority, even not the majority, even just a small percentage of the people who go to Davos were actually to understand what's at stake and change what they're doing. And get governments to put in laws that would drive down emissions, that would create a more equitable society. It would change the world. It would change the world. Now I think we're in a little bit of a different place, because in a way the power, rests You know, we're in a power shift right now. And that's what I think is so important. But that's a little bit about, you know, every year, why do we go? What's the thinking? You know, this year we put a big focus actually on the banks, where we were able to really confront the banks with a report that showed how much money they continue to invest in fossil fuels, even though they go to Davos and say they're driving for net zero. And then I can go and talk to them. And the world's media is there. I think that's the other thing to remember is the world's media is there, and that can make them very uncomfortable, which is part of what, you know, I just have to hope always that if they are confronted with their role in what they're destroying, that maybe, just maybe, they'll change. And I think people like Greta Thunberg, obviously, and all the climate strike youth, that's part of what, a big part of what they're doing too.
Mm-hmm. You know, Marcus, I was interested in how you perceive the many layers then of the man who created this, of Klaus Schwab, as you followed him and documented what he was up to for those 2 years.
Oh, it's it's really very complex because I was thrown. I for a long time I didn't know what to make out of it. Actually, so the first thing is that for me, all these 300 employees, I really like them. They're very, very nice people, but I think a lot of them don't dare to speak out loud. They are yes-sayers a little bit. It's normal because it's their career, and they're clean-cut people. So they're not very edgy or something like that. That's maybe something I encountered. Then of course the I mean, when we made the film, you could see clearly that in 2019 we had all these so-called anti-establishment presidents, like Trump was there, Theresa May was there, also on the ticket of a so-called anti-establishment a little bit, and then of course Macron, who was also not he came also with that ticket actually, and then the next year suddenly they were all they didn't come because they had so many problems at home, and suddenly Bolsonaro appeared on stage together with Theresa, with Greta Thunberg, of course. So I could see that making that film at that moment was very crucial, because it was really a sign of a time. You could really see how fast the world is changing. I have to admit, in a certain way, we were very lucky that Greta Thunberg came, and as you see in the film, I was focusing a little bit on the very fact that I like that Klaus Schwab was giving the youth a hand. He didn't push them aside. He said, okay, he built a certain bridge because he said, okay, it's us actually who put a lot of burden on the youth. So I like that fact. So I have to admit, I like this person. I think he's waking up early in the morning, and I believe him that he tries to change the world. If he succeeds, is a total another question. But I was asking myself, it's so complex to change this world. The next thing, which is not elaborated too well in the film, is the Shapers, is this youth movement of young global leaders or social entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs who he is really supporting. And I think this is the like the Greta Thunberg youth, the Friday for Future young people who are trying to fight for awareness in the world. They are also very important, because they try to to go with a different capitalistic view, and I believe that they're doing that. So I really can't tell you because I don't know what to think about this event after 2 years. I just know it's so complex, and the film was trying to give them a word that they can explain what they're doing, and that the audience can listen and make their own judgment about what's happening.
Well, and in many ways, you know, actually, I think you left a lot of us conflicted, and that's a good thing, because you showed us the many layers of this man, and you're talking about the drone thing in Rwanda that we saw as well, that you shot, right? And you were in different parts showing the work of the World Economic Forum. At the same time, there's this man who says, you know, I have to have dialogue, and then we see him continue to facilitate dialogue amongst people just like himself. And so, like, you showed us all those different layers, and I think that was, I thought that was really great that you allowed us to see that, so that we could actually figure it out or have these questions, because no one is not that layered, right? But you rarely get to see that in a film.
Yes, the most important thing is I think I had my preconceptions, and a lot of them I could see them. It is like that. I mean, it is, you can see these CEOs when they are surrounded, when they're surrounding Trump, they're exactly like you really think in your worst nightmare. But then you have this Dominic Worry, one of the employees, one of the people who are working there, and he came from the same world as Jennifer, but he said to me that he thought that he can do there more than, for example, in the NGO world, and he was there, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. How can that be? I mean, and he said, yeah, because he thinks that he can directly work with the CEOs and try to change their mind. And I can see that point, and I like the guy very much. I was together with him for 2 years, and I liked him as I do like Jennifer Morgan very, very much. So and the other guy I like very much is Murat. I can't think of him as a bad person. He is actually one of the elite people, but I think he has the heart at the right place, and he wants to change the world. So and he's fighting in this. He's fighting for it as well.
Murat's the guy with the gull-wing car, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Jennifer, I have to get your take. What's your read on Klaus Schwab?
Oh, well, I think for me, it's less about Klaus Schwab, and it's more about what Davos and the World Economic Forum represents and what it has not done. It's not that complex. I'm sorry, but you know, those guys, and they're mostly guys who go there, if they have rigged a system. Right? This system is all about short-term economic benefit, profit for them. And the World Economic Forum, that's what it represents. Klaus Schwab, you know, I'm not going to comment on I'm not going to call people bad people or not. I think they're people who are trying to make a difference. But I think you have to put that to a side, and you have to look at what the WEF does. It brings together people to make money. And you see that in the deal with Trump and those CEOs. You see it, yes, they do nice projects here and there, but 50 years, what's happened in 50 years? The world is a much worse place in 50 years. Emissions are rising. We're in a climate emergency. Biodiversity is, you know, at a point where we're losing species at an unmeasurable, you know, rate. Inequality, racial injustice, and the people who fund the World Economic Forum and the people who go to the World Economic Forum are the people who are continuing that system, and they use it for that. And that, to me, you know, all of the multi-stakeholder work, the public-private partnership, maybe it was a good vision when it started, but it hasn't worked. It has not worked. And what I have always said to Klaus Schwab, you know, directly in the letter that I wrote, which was partially in the film, is, you know, if he and others were to bring together the bankers of the world and say, you know, we're in a climate crisis. Okay, what are the 5 things you're going to go and tell your government to go do? Because you know that the risks that are coming forward are creating an unsustainable bubble, and we are going to have we're in the middle of a climate catastrophe, but you're also driving you know, investments that are no longer going to be possible because we can't have any more investments in fossil fuels, and got them to actually then become active in the government, right? Pushing governments. Then they could make a big difference. That's what's not that I don't think is very complex at all, but they don't want that. They want voluntary measures. They want public-private partnerships, what all these nice things that they show have been propagating. And that's why I just don't, you know, it's not about people not wanting to try, but I also think, as I say in the film, it takes real courage to have truth to power conversations, but that's what I expect. I think I have a huge respect for Klaus Schwab and what he has built over those years, but we are at a moment in history right now where he should be using that to change the world for the better. And the approach that has been worked and approached by the West has created a nightmare. And now it needs to change the system. So I think that's, you know, you just can't overlook that. Even if there are nice people doing nice projects at the WEF, it's not. If you look at the state of the world, we are in bad shape. And the people who go to Davos and fund the WEF are the reason.
We have a question from one of our viewers here. Has Klaus and the Davos team seen the film? And if so, what was their reaction?
Yes, I think it's a question to me. Yes, they have seen the film and they had a hard time accepting it. So it was not easy for them to swallow what's said there, what's being said there. But on the other side, the employees also saw the film, and Klaus Schwab always at the end he was saying that he appreciates the film very much and the work which is done. It was more his staff, they expected maybe a little bit something else, but he, in a while, he could understand why it's so important that all the critical questions are in that film, that the film is not one-sided, and that I got this access, but I had to show indeed both sides as it is my own thinking. I needed to address all these questions. So, but he liked the fact as well that that was invited to very big festivals, to big A festivals. We opened Leipzig, we were at ITFA and had huge screenings there. And at the same time, Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and the Shapers, they are working with that film. And the Shapers especially, we had a screening with the Shapers. There were 500 young people there, and they were giving standing ovations when Jennifer was talking, but they were also giving standing ovations when he was talking. So it was interesting, and they were booing when Trump was coming on stage. So so they were involved in the film, and they are not biased. They are not these scholars of Klaus Schwab. They have their own opinion, and they want more. They also fed up with the fact that Bolsonaro is there, and all these companies who do bad in the world, like Monsanto. They didn't like them at all, but still they believe in the very that they're being supported there, and they can somehow get their ideas done through that event.
We've hit on Bolsonaro a few times, the fact that he was there. And we see a couple of very interesting scenes. That really embarrassing scene where Al Gore tries to name drop and he ends up name dropping one of Bolsonaro's big enemies. How do you shoot so that they forget you're there and they just continue to hang themselves in those moments?
Actually, like all documentary filmmakers, we are a very small team. So that scene, for example, it was just me. I had a boom. I'm doing the sound well with my cameraman, and because we were so much embedded in Davos, everybody knew us, and we had very good contacts that his own people were pushing us up to that event, where never ever a camera crew was allowed. And they were protecting us that we could stay there. They wanted us to film there. They wanted us to get all these scenes because they trusted that we are not misusing this opportunity. And that's what we were doing. I wasn't showing everything what was happening there, because I actually approached Bolsonaro and said, if I may get his sound, and he accepted. And I got a lot of sound bits which I couldn't use in the film because it wasn't even more embarrassing. But overall, the scene was one of our key scenes in the film, because you can see how people were avoiding him and how they approached him, and even so that Al Gore probably he went to him as well because he saw the camera, because we knew him already, and maybe he took advantage of the very situation that it was filmed. Maybe even we were influencing the whole scene, but that doesn't matter. It was a scene which tells more than 1,000 words, because it's just you can feel the situation and how difficult it is to talk with such a person. And you can Jennifer, I mean, he didn't even give her anything. He was very rude, actually, in a certain way. And then you can see how difficult it is to talk to someone like him.
In fact, Jennifer, I don't even think he looked at you.
I don't think he did. I think, and I had to make a decision. I actually forgot the camera was there then, because if you're in that situation, your adrenaline is going. And I was in the midst of making a decision. Do I even go talk to the person or not, because of what he represents and what he's done, had already done by then, and having Greenpeace next to this person who is doing such harm. But then I decided, if not now, then when? This is why I'm here. And I had hoped that I would at least be able to have some kind of exchange with him, especially on behalf of our Brazilian colleagues. Greenpeace has a big presence in Brazil. But he clearly wouldn't have nothing to do with me. Nothing at all. And I don't think he made eye contact. I tried to stay because I wanted to try, and then it was clear that was it.
No, it was a very telling moment. The really telling moment as well is that your cameras are in the room as members of the World Economic Forum are trying to talk to Aung San Suu Kyi about the Rohingya. And she changes the subject and starts talking about the air conditioning and how much it's a problem. And that's why she doesn't like to go to these conferences. Help me out here. Like, what were you thinking, Marcus?
It was a hilarious scene. It was the first time that I could really feel that now we get a grasp of something, what's happening in these rooms. And I had the feeling that the situation didn't change because of the camera. The camera wasn't there. Everybody forgot the camera because I had my microphone is very, very big, and it was hanging there. And suddenly, after a while, after 10, 15 minutes, you even in these bilateral meetings, you start forgetting the camera. But that was a very a meaningful scene with Aung San Suu Kyi, because you also could see the art of diplomacy, how he is trying to to talk with her about these critical moments, and it's not more and not less than that. It's and you wonder yourself, what sense does actually make such a conversation, because it's just getting in contact with her, telling her that you're not totally agreeing with her with the way how he dealt with the Rohingyas, but nothing else. And these are these conversations, how they work out. I couldn't even tell what did you get out of it, but it's the contact. It's this constant contact which you're having with these people, and just in a small way trying to tell them without hurting them what you think about what they're doing.
Well,
that's how I felt, at least.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I mean, that again raises these questions. We see his efforts at dialogue and diplomacy, and we see who's at the table and all of these people who come. And Jennifer has made the point about, what change they could make if they wanted to, because they certainly have the economic clout to do it. So you each have keen insights into the economic and the business and the social status quo that the WEF represents. And I'm wondering what each of you sees changing as we navigate this moment in time, the realities of COVID-19 and what that is doing around the world, and the reigniting of the fight against racism and for greater equality that's playing out in the streets. I'm just wondering how you see that, all of those things together at this moment in time. And maybe Jennifer, you want to start.
Yeah, I think it's a moment where the system is shaking for the good. I mean, I think we know that racial injustice is just completely unacceptable, and the domination of people of color and Blacks over centuries is still going on, and that the system that has supported that kind of domination is also the system that is part of patriarchy. It's the system that's part of environmental destruction, right? And what you're seeing right now is that people aren't willing to accept that anymore. And I think even before what has kind of come up in the massive protests in the US from COVID, this disruption in this system, I think is, first of all, of course, we need to take care of people to make sure they don't get sick. But what it has shown is the deep inequalities, the fact that people don't have health care, the fact that the social systems that are there, it's made it so raw and so transparent, I think, to everyone. And now what you're starting to see, I think, is that people starting to connect the dots between that inequity and the economic system that we're in, the social system that we're in, and starting to get engaged. And I think for institutions like the World Economic Forum, and now they last week came out and said they're going to do the big reset this year. They're going to go back to Davos and meet, but they're not the ones to do the reset. The reset's happening from people. The reset is happening from people who are suffering from injustice. And so in a way, they need to actually get out of the way and let other people come in who have the solutions to fix the police system in the United States or deal with the inequities in countries all around the world. And I think there's going to be a huge legitimacy question. The day that the WEF announced their big reset, the Fight Inequality Alliance put out a great ad in the Financial Times, just kind of saying, wait a minute, no, you're not doing this reset. We are. So I think, I'm hopeful. I'm more hopeful than I've been a long time. Protest is working. Encourage people to stay at it, because I think it's calling straight into the face of what's there, and the decisions that are going to be made in the next weeks and months are going to make the world of difference in so many levels. So that's why I just encourage people to stay at it, get engaged. It's making a difference.
Marcus Vetter, what are you thinking as you watch what's
Yeah.
unfolding?
I see very fearful that now the world central banks are putting even more trillions into the same system, which actually led to this inequality. Because all that money will go again to the elite, and they will get richer and the other get poorer. So on the one side, I agree with Jennifer Morgan, but on the other side, I see that from a very pessimistic point of view, because I have the feeling it's the same what was being done in 2008, just 10 times more. On the other side, it's coming all out with Jeffrey Epstein, all these things. I mean, it's all about the elite. And people are suddenly aware, they are connecting the dots. That's what I also see. And so these protests, they're real. And I have the feeling this will be the global reset. It's coming from the people. That's what I feel as well. I heard that the World Economic Forum, they will now have different small hubs in January with the shapers. I like that approach because it's going away from Davos to hopefully to these shapers, to these young people, and at the same time he invited the Friday for Future movement. We were shooting with them the last time, so I think they are changing as well, hopefully. And because they are decentralizing now a little bit, at least that's what I'm seeing. So because that's my hope that in the end, we in a certain way, we need to work together, and hopefully they get it, that now really something is changing. The mood with the people is changing everywhere, in Chile, in Hong Kong, wherever you look. People are now going on to the streets, and there is an upheaval. So I think it's the most the most unique moment in history we are experiencing right now. Where does it lead to? I'm pessimistic, but let's see.
Well, let's go back to then the World Economic Forum and the man who started it. We've got a question from Phil Silver, who's saying he'd never heard of Klaus Schwab before this film. And he says, given his uniqueness, do you know of any succession plans? And I'll just add, would there be succession plans, given what you both have just said about where the world is right now? Would there even be succession plans for that organization?
You mean succession plans? Who's replacing Klaus Schwab?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think so. For now, I don't think so. There were talks about the successor, but I think Klaus Schwab still feels strong enough to continue. There's Brenda Borge, but I don't think that he's a successor or he's planned as a successor. So that's a little bit the problem. I mean, you need a very charismatic personality who is not that a clean cut. Like you need charismatic personality, and I personally can't see him right now where he's coming from. I don't know if Jennifer knows more, but.
No, I don't know of any
I don't
plans.
know of,
no, not at all. And I think it'll be really interesting to ask this question in January, you know, not for the successor of Klaus Schwab, but for what the World Economic Forum does. Does it decentralize? Does it, because it's multi-stakeholder, but not all stakeholders who go have equal voice, right? And equal access. I mean, you pay, you know, it's a different system for different people who go. So let's see what it looks like. And I hope it allows more voices in. I hope it becomes less focused on voluntary things and more focused on actually getting the new economic models in place that we need that will bring well-being to people. It's all to play for. And I agree with Marcus. I mean, all the money, it's going in a mixture of places. If it goes in the wrong place, we're looking at disaster even worse. But right now, that's why people need to be getting engaged. The German auto industry lost last week. They didn't get everything that they wanted to, and that's because people engaged, just as an example.
Well, and you know, January is a long way off right now, given how much keeps changing day to day in this world right now. And it's not necessarily a given they'll go back to same old in January or even be able to, is it?
No, what they've said is they're going to have something that'll happen in Davos, but it'll be much smaller. And I think they're talking about doing other events in other hubs.
So what is the lesson, Marcus, of as we watch your film and we see this a bit of an evolution of understanding of what this organization is, and we see the pitfalls laid bare. What's the message for, like, what are the questions we should be asking that we haven't been asking of the people who show up at Davos?
First of all, I think the lesson is that that we have to accept that we have preconceptions towards these, and I can clearly see it as I did, because it's totally different than I thought that it is. And what I heard as well, there's a lot of people who are saying, oh, they're good doers, and who are complaining about I mean, George Soros is not part of the Davos movement, but we're saying he's supporting all these open society movements, and that's bad because you're manipulating. You're trying to fund certain people. So there's a lot of people who are saying. Who are complaining about the World Economic Forum to be doing too much about the world and making the world a better place. I didn't know that either. So the lesson is, I think, for me, the whole Klaus Schwab is a host. For me, that I could understand. The host is not criticizing his guests. The guests themselves, they have to make the best out of it. And one of those guests is Jennifer, for example. She has the possibility in other NGOs to get involved and to fight there. I think maybe it's not about criticizing Klaus Schwab always, or the World Economic Forum. So accepting that there is this place and taking advantage of it, that this is the place where everybody goes, whether they're bad or not, and trying to change their way of thinking. And I think sometimes that's happening. Even they're greenwashing, even so they are doing their own stuff afterwards. But you have to accept as well, there is now a Christine Lagarde, whatever you think about her, and she's talking openly that she wants to invest or to work with the central bank more in the Green Deal. And there is a von der Leyen who is proclaiming, saying the same thing, that she wants this Green Deal. Whether you believe them or it's real, I don't know. Whether they really believe in that, I don't know. But at least it's a place where these people are gathering, and you have at least a chance to try to get into their hearts and change their behavior.
Well, I think you made us think, and I think you made us rethink some of the stuff that maybe passes by us in news stories or something, to let us see a little more of what's really going on under the surface there. So thank you for that, film.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jennifer Morgan, as well. Shane, you're standing by, ready to, we'll bring it back to Shane.
To wrap us up, thank you so much to our guests today for this fascinating and incredibly timely discussion, Jennifer Morgan, Marcus Vetter, and of course our host, Anna Maria Tremonti. Please join us for our final Big Ideas conversation on Tuesday, June 9th, as we dig into the big business of art fraud, the art of the con, and why we fall for it, as seen in the documentary Made You Look, a true story about fake art, directed by Barry Average. Thanks again, and goodbye for now.